Hello guys, welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be talking about a very common problem that a lot of people have when you're doing Anki cards. So you're in the rhythm of actually doing your reviews, you know Anki's great, but actually you keep getting cards wrong. What do you do about those cards? Do you just throw them in the bin, but then it's content that you need to know, but then why do you keep getting it wrong? It's so confusing what to do. Do you keep pressing again, but then surely that will reduce the interval and you don't want to keep pressing again to a card? So do you just lie and say, okay, hard, but then you actually don't know it and you keep getting it wrong over and over again? It's a real problem. So in this video, I'll be giving recommendations on what I think you should do when you keep getting cards wrong. Now, of course, if you're not even familiar with Anki and you haven't even gotten to the groove of doing daily reviews, then I suggest you check out my other videos on Anki which I've made, because this video kind of assumes that you're using Anki regularly already. So if you're not, and if you're just starting out, then watch those other videos and come back to this later on. So firstly, what I suggest with cards when you keep getting them wrong is don't be afraid to press the again button. Now initially I was very scared to do this myself because I thought, okay, it's just going to mess up with my intervals and that card is going to keep coming back over and over again and I'm going to enter into what's called ease hell. Now if you're not familiar with this term ease hell, essentially what it means is because you've pressed again on a card too many times, the interval is very short. So Anki will keep showing you that card over and over and over again. And if the main root of the problem is you're getting that card wrong, then you're just wasting time because you're seeing that card, you'll keep getting it wrong, nothing's improving, and you keep seeing that card over and over again in a short interval of time. So it's basically a very bad situation to be in because it makes you unmotivated, thinking you don't know anything when you're doing your Anki cards, and it's only because you keep seeing the cards you keep getting wrong over and over again. Now the reason why I say it's fine to press again as much as you want is because the following steps will kind of lead you to prevent ease hell from happening. If you just press again and you don't know the cards and you don't do anything about it, that's when ease hell will happen. However, in this video, if you follow the steps, then that's preventing ease hell from happening in the first place. So for that reason, don't be afraid to press again as many times as you need, because you don't want to lie and say it's good because you don't know the card, so that when you see it in 26 days or whatever the interval says and you don't know it, then you're just lying to the algorithm and it's going to think you know it, and then it's going to show you in 2 months and you still don't know it. You're not learning anything at all. So it's not a good way of doing things. So the first step is to press again as many times as you need on a card which you don't know, because the following steps will work out what's going on and will work out how to fix it. So the second step is why pressing again many times becomes useful, and that's to do with Leech cards. Now, if you pressed again on a card many times, you might have seen a little pop-up saying, oh, card marked as Leech. But if you're not sure what that means, or you just ignore it, like what do I do about that? What does that mean? Basically, a Leech card is a card you've pressed again on enough times that then that card becomes marked as Leech. Now, how many times you need to press again for a card to become Leech is called the Leech threshold. And that's something that you can change in the settings. So if you're new to this and you haven't heard of it, what I suggest is going through the settings. I've made a full in-depth video on all the other settings that I use for Anki, so if you're interested, then check that video out. But for this purpose of this video only, I'll be focusing on the Leech threshold. So if you go onto your Anki settings, find where it says Leech threshold. I like to set mine to 4. That means if I press a card again 4 times, then it will get marked with a tag called Leech. That's basically what Leech means. It doesn't do anything else to the card, so it's up to you completely what you decide to do with those Leech cards, but it's just an indication to show you that you've pressed again on that card 4 times. And the reason why that's useful is because once you've got a card marked as Leech, that's when you need to know, okay, listen, I don't know the card, I need to do something about it, which is where the next step comes in. Now, the next step is actually, you don't want a card becoming Leech. Ideally, you want to prevent cards from becoming Leech, and the way to do that is by pressing a red flag on a card that you find hard so that you can work on it before that card becomes Leech. Now there's nothing wrong with cards becoming Leech, but essentially while you're doing your reviews, you can just press a red flag to prevent it from getting to a Leech stage. Okay, now step 4 is where it gets interesting and where most of the work or the fun or the dealing with, these cards happens. So you need to set a time to schedule, that didn't make sense, did it? You need to schedule a time to go through your Leech and your red cards, because these are the cards that you've identified as you not knowing by pressing again on them too many times, and while going through reviews you've pressed a red flag on it. So these are cards that you are not really sure about. So schedule yourself a time to go through these cards. And so this is where it gets interesting. You're getting a card wrong, and I like to make it very easy. These are cards that you keep getting wrong or you don't know properly. So I like to make it easy by telling myself, I either know the content or I don't know the content. Very easy, okay? There's no middle ground. This applies to any card. You either know the content or you don't know the content. Now you might be thinking, right, okay, if I keep getting a card wrong or if I flag it red, surely it's always I don't know the content. But actually it can fall into you knowing the content, but the card not being good enough, and that's the reason you're getting it wrong. So what I mean by that is you know the content, but actually if you look at the card, you only think you know it, you don't fully understand it. So if you were to take that card and explain it to a 10-year-old, would you be able to explain the concepts in that card using simple, plain language that a 10-year-old would understand? And if the answer is no, that shows that you haven't actually understood the card. And that's something called the Feynman technique. And I've actually, talked about this Feynman technique in lots of my other videos, and it's a way of testing whether you actually understand the information or not. Because you might think, oh yes, I know the knowledge, but then if you try and think, okay, how would I explain this to my 10-year-old cousin, or if you've got a younger brother or sister or whoever, then you actually realize, okay, wait, I don't know how to explain this. I'm just learning this using the terminology that is familiar with me, the jargon that's familiar with me, but I don't actually know how to explain it to a layman. And that actually reveals to you what you thought you knew, you actually don't understand properly. And that's an indication for you to go back to the content, to your revision sources, and to learn that information more thoroughly. Alternatively, if you know the content but you keep getting your Anki cards wrong, it might be to do with the way your cards are formatted. So there might just be too much information on that card for you to recall properly. So you might be skipping a few things. Or the card might contain irrelevant information. Or you might be confusing it with a different card, and that's called memory interference. This happens to me a lot. Sometimes I'll be recalling a card, but I'll actually think of the answer to a different card, which means you're getting those concepts muddled up in your mind, and that's called memory interference. And that's a huge problem, because if you don't ignore that, then there's probably neural connections and whatever going on in your mind that's strengthening those information. So you're basically reinforcing the wrong information, which you do not want to do. And so I've already made a video on how to make effective Anki cards to prevent memory interference from happening, and to make sure that you don't overload yourself with too much information on that card. So if that's the problem, if you know the content and that's the problem, then go and watch that video, because that will help you solve that aspect. And now the other hand is you don't know the content. So we've talked about you do know the content, you don't know the content. And that's very simple. If you think about it, obviously if you don't know something, you're gonna get it wrong. Very simple. And if that's the case, you need to look at that card and think, okay, do I actually know what it's talking about? And if the answer is no, go ahead and relearn the content. Go back to your textbook, go back to your websites, go back to your lectures, whatever you've been using to make those Anki cards, and relearn that content. So by doing this, by going through each card and analyzing it, saying, okay, do I know it or not? If I don't, relearn it. If I do, what's the problem? Is it too much information? Is it memory interference? Is it something else? Fix each of those cards, and then set yourself to do just the cards in those deck by firstly just going through it in the browser. What's the front? What's the back? What's the question? What's the answer? What's the statement? What's the close answer? Just go through all of those cards, make sure you know them, and do that as a deck. Once you've done that as a deck, then feel free to take away the Leech tag so that that card is no longer Leech, because you've now just relearned that information. And hopefully when that card comes to you again, you'll actually be able to learn it, and you won't have to press again on it if you follow these steps. So that's just my approach to dealing with red flag cards and dealing with Leech cards. So I hope you found those tips helpful. If you're new to my channel, my name's Abby and I'm a final year medical student studying in London. If you like this video, press the like button. If you're new, consider subscribing down below. I also make newsletters, so feel free to check out the previous editions, link in the description below, and if it's something you feel like you want to sign up to, then feel free to sign up to that too. With that being said, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you again in my next video.